Hi everyone. My name's Jane and I work for Primary Industries Education Foundation Australia. A massive thank you to everyone for joining us today for this very special National Science Week event. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land from which I'm speaking to you today, the Wurundjeri people, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. During today's session, we're going to hear from 3 wine industry experts, all about their roles, their career pathways, and some of the innovations that they're adopting within their practice to improve productivity, profitability, and sustainability. At the end of the session, I'm going to pass over to Joe from Wine Australia, who's going to give us a bit of a taster of some of the upcoming resources that will be available from Wine Australia, all about careers in the wine industry and the opportunities that are available to young people interested in getting into the industry, leaving school, or after finishing tertiary education. Thanks so much for that. I reckon we'll start by getting each of our panelists to give us a bit of an intro to who they are, what their current role is, and how they ended up there. So I might start by saying g'day to Emma Taylor. Emma, would you be able to give us a bit of an intro into who you are, where you are, because we've got panelists from all over the country today, and what you do?
So I work at Waterley Wines in the Yarra Valley in Victoria. I'm the assistant viticulturist. I've been working here in the vineyard for just over 2.5 years. My role includes general vineyard tasks like pruning and driving tractors, as well as a bit more of the technical side, which includes managing and participating in our vineyard trials and research.
Beautiful. And how did you end up in that role, Emma?
So I sort of picked subjects at high school that just sort of interested me. I didn't really have a direct path that I wanted to go in. So then I did a similar thing with university studies. So I knew I wanted to go to university, but again, I didn't really know. So I just picked things that I sort of liked. And I ended up with a Bachelor of Agriculture. I did that for 3 years, and then I was also working on my uncle's vineyard, doing a bit of pruning and a bit of work here and there to help him. When I finished my degree, I was sort of leaning towards more of an animal agricultural industry. But my uncle knew the vineyard manager here, so he suggested I just keep going with it. And so here I am still today.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that, Emma. That's fantastic. That's really cool that you had that family connection and that was a great gateway in. But obviously, you know, having the opportunity to try out a lot of different things, and by the sounds of things you did, and you had a lot of different interests. That's really fantastic that you ended up where you are today. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to pass over to Jo Wisdom now, who's in WA, and just hear a little bit about her career journey and her current role. I should also just point out, sorry, I did forget to mention at the start of the session, if anyone has any questions throughout the session, you're more than welcome to pop them in the chat box, and we will ask our panelists throughout, but we'll also have a designated Q&A time at the end. So if you do have any burning questions throughout, you're more than welcome to pop them in the chat, but otherwise you could save them and ask them at the end. All right, Jo, over to you.
Thanks, Jane. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm coming to you from Whadjuk Noongar territory in Western Australia. I'm actually based in Perth at the moment, but my business is called Plantagenet, and it's in the Great Southern, which is not one of the biggest, wellest known wine regions in Australia, but its claim to fame is probably that it's one of the most remote wine regions in the world. So we're about a 5-hour drive from Perth, which is one of the most remote capital cities in the world. So we produce really classic styles of wine that are very clean and green, and we live in this really pristine environment, which you can see behind me. This is my vineyard here. And I came to this role in a really meandering kind of way. So it's been quite a journey, so I won't share the whole journey with you, but I started off not knowing what I wanted to do either. Like Emma, I did a Bachelor of Arts actually, and I majored in anthropology. And I liked people, and to be honest, I like drinking wine. So when the opportunity came up to study viticulture at the University of Western Australia, I took that as a second degree. And I stayed in that environment for quite a while. I actually ended up doing a PhD in viticulture. Not something that you need to have to go into the wine industry. I actually spent quite a lot of time in academia, but it taught me a lot about how to manage people and practices and processes and really big projects. And so that's what I do a lot of now. So my role is I'm the owner and director at Plantagenet along with my husband. We bought the business about 2 years ago. It's a crazy thing buying a wine business that's already established. So Plantagenet's a 50-year-old business. So there's a lot of responsibilities that come with that and a lot of expectations. But what I spend most of my time working on is strategy. So how we go about our business, what's really important. And because I've got a viticultural background, I do like to sort of favour conversations with viticulturists and my vineyard manager. They're the ones that I sort of poke around with more so than the winemaker. I kind of trust in the winemaker and leave him up to his own devices. But in the vineyard, I like to dabble and run a lot of my own little experiments. And that's probably my exposure to technology is in the vineyard.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, Jo. That's awesome. And I've got a lot of questions for you because you do a lot of really cool stuff around technology and innovation, which is our focus for today's session. So I will be back to you very soon. Hans, if I could pass over to you, would you mind giving us a bit of an overview of who you do, or who you are, what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a viticulturalist and vineyard manager. Well, I probably do everything really around the place at Penley Estate in Coonawarra, which is in the southeast or Limestone Coast region of South Australia. I'm like, it's a long journey as to how I got here. I have been here working at Penley for 6 years, but I've actually, out of school, I was torn really. I was torn between geology and viticulture. I had grown up around vineyards, so had that interest, but I also had an interest in geology, and a career sounded quite exciting in that. So I ended up studying both. I've got a bachelor in both, so going to university for both viticulture and geology. And I guess I've been 25 years since I finished my initial studies, but I found both really complementary. So I look back and go, studying geology, even though I'm working in viticulture, has really helped me out over the years, and it's increased the breadth of my experience. So geology for me has been a really great thing to study in terms of geology is all around us, so an appreciation of the landscape, and then bringing that back to a vineyard on a really local level to say, well, what's the influences that have shaped this vineyard and therefore the vines and what we're growing. And so geology is a field that looks backwards. It tries to piece apart what's happened, whilst vines are something I've really enjoyed working with, for the fact that they're really responsive. So you can make a change, be it pruning the vines in a different way, and you'll see them respond. And similarly, they respond to the landscape and their location in that. And so that's where I find a lot of joy, I suppose, in working and thinking in the context of all my experience and what I've learnt there. And I also bring a fair bit of, I guess, research to practice. So the wine sector is really fortunate with the amount of research that's in place. Joan was saying about having done a PhD. We know a lot, and there's a lot that you can experiment with and improve and look at sustainability. And today we're talking technology, so the way that we're looking and sensing our vineyards are all changing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for that, Hans. I'd like to say a big g'day to Lucindale Area School as well as Casterton College. Nice to see you here. Thank you so much for that information in the chat. Hans, I'm going to come back to you, if that's okay, just for a minute, to ask you a little bit, because we're talking about not only the innovations in the wine industry, but also the opportunities, about your Nuffield Scholarship. And Jo, I'm going to talk to you a little bit as well about your STEM cadetship at Flinders University, just to find out for the young people in the audience about the different opportunities that are available to people working in the Australian wine industry. Obviously, these are fantastic, supported scholarships and opportunities. So if you're wanting to learn more when you're in the industry, there are many, many ways that you can do that, and most of them are subsidised or even paid. So Hans, would you be able to just tell us a little bit about what a Nuffield Scholarship is, and then a bit about the Nuffield Scholarship that you completed?
Yep, I'll put it in the context of, I guess, my studies as well, though. So both my geology and viticulture studies I did part-time, and then so I was working at the same time. And for me, that gave me really good context to what I was learning. And then similarly, like once I finished my formal studies, like it doesn't stop there. I think, we're all curious and we're forever learning. It's just, and so I've been fortunate to have done studying a range of things, and again, I'm working with researchers in the vineyard, and it's actually my background in geology, which again made me ask questions around how we were managing data in viticulture, and why I then applied for a Nuffield Scholarship. So a Nuffield Scholarship basically gives farmers an opportunity to pursue a topic of interest to them, and to embark on a around the world or international travel, and to see examples from across agriculture, but also potentially other industries, and learn from that and bring that back to the context here in their own vineyard or on their own farm, but then also contribute that to the broader sector to advance the way things are doing, or challenge ideas and concepts, and just bring something new to the table in the way that we operate. But yeah, I definitely feel that. So I was really fortunate as a 2021 scholar to be sponsored by One Australia. And yeah, I was looking at data management in viticulture, with my topic actually being, here come the robots, but what do we do with the data? And that's been a really surprising journey that's taken me around the world, to answer that question.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. And I think it is really important for all the young people in the audience, as I said, to know that in ag, there are so many different scholarships and so many opportunities, because the industry really wants people to learn and to see how it's improving all over the world, and bring that back to Australia, so that Australian food and fibre production is at the forefront of technology, innovation, and sustainability. So that's awesome. Joe, I might hand over to you now, if that's okay, to just find out a little bit about your STEM cadetship at Flinders Uni.
Sure, thanks. I also agree with Hans that one of the beautiful things about the wine industry is that everyone loves learning. And I think part of that is because there's like real value to be gained in terms of profit in your product. The higher quality product that you can make, the higher return that you can get. So it's really worth the investment. And what I really love about the wine industry, but it's also a bit of a curse of the wine industry, is that my name is on the label the whole way through. So you know what's happening at the vineyard, and you can tell that all the way through the supply chain when you're looking at my bottle of wine and it's got my name on it. So you know where it was grown, how it was made, who made what's in it, and probably into the future how it was shipped around, and all of the sustainability metrics that come with that. And so I've started working on a project with an ag tech development company, actually, looking at better ways to measure soils. Soil carbon is something that we hear a lot about, but measuring soils in general is really, really hard, and it's quite expensive. So I've started on that journey, but there were so many things to developing a product. So understanding market analysis and technology development and stakeholder engagement and all of those things. And so this opportunity came up to study digital technology at Flinders, and it was supported by a STEM cadetship, which meant that the whole cohort is made up of women in the wine industry. And that's been a fantastic journey, because a lot of our work is group based. And so I've had this fabulous team of women And we work remotely because we're all in the regions. And so we get together and we're really a supportive group and we're learning together, but we all have this same aspiration to be upskilled in terms of technology and how that can be useful to our businesses. So it's been an amazing cadetship. We got to come together recently to do an intensive, and it really was intense. I think my ears actually, my brain came out of my ears. It was very full on, but we were learning about things like robotics and engineering design and 3D printing, and how to use, how to do coding and all sorts of really, really useful things to think about. How can I then have those conversations with the technology developers and also the users of the technology to make, the two things marry together, which means that we get really effective technology.
That's awesome. How amazing that you are having the opportunity to develop the tech that you need for, these issues that we're facing. That's so, so cool. Well, I might pass over to Emma now. And I would just like to ask you, Emma, on the note of technology and innovation, if you could describe an innovation that you employ within your role, and talk a little bit about what this innovation is used for, how it improves your production, whether it's through sustainability, productivity, or profitability, and what the original way of doing the specific task was, and then how the innovations improve that.
Yep. So in the vineyard, we do a lot of counting and estimates and things like that. So they sort of relate to yields and I guess other things depending on, like any illnesses or things like that we might be able to find in the vineyard. So normally for yield estimates, I'd have to go out and count 10 to 15 vines in 110 different blocks 4 to 5 times a year. I then have to type that into a computer, and then it'll give us an average across the whole block. So this can take weeks and gives us sort of a vague average, which isn't, it's sort of helpful, but not really too detailed or anything really. So to try and make this process faster and more accurate, we're trying a new technology that uses GoPro footage, and then it gets put into a program or a software that spits out a whole heap of information about every vine, all the measurements, all the data that we need. This data is then condensed into a dashboard with maps and different graphs, so we can really easily look at, this is what is in this block, this is where there might be some problem areas, this is what we have to look at, or this is sort of our yield expectation at this point in time. So this technology makes stuff super quick, super easy, and the future plan of it is to put it on the front of a tractor, so while we're doing other jobs, you're doing the filming at the same time and you're collecting all that data. So that means I don't lose my job, essentially. I don't have to go out and count 10 vines. I don't have to estimate stuff. So all the data we receive back is really accurate, and it's a lot faster for me as well. So I think we're just trying to work on the, precision and efficiency of what we're doing with that specific technology.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Emma. And I think you made a really good point when you said just because this technology is being incorporated doesn't mean you're going to lose your job. And I think that sometimes can be a bit of a concern for people adopting new technologies and thinking, oh, well, there's not going to be any work for anyone. But no, the work's just a little bit different. It's definitely faster and more efficient, but there's still needed, people still needed to operate these technologies, still needed to manage them and maintain them. So there's always going to be jobs in agriculture, but the work may look a little bit different and hopefully be a bit easier and a bit more pleasant for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Hans, on that note, I might ask you to share some of the innovations or technologies that you employ or that you've learned about throughout your studies and your journey that are improving the wine industry in different ways.
Yeah, so one that we use, and most definitely a more recent example, is we're looking at canopy temperature to give us an indication of vine water status, so irrigation requirement, or whether vines need irrigating at all. And that's got a lot of relevance just in a changing climate, and we're looking ahead to the coming seasons that could be hotter and drier, and so that'll be really important to get a good handle on what sort of irrigation the vine, or what the water requirement is of the vines. Now, traditionally, again, it's replaces, well, in some ways replaces the sampling that needed to be done. So typically, as a vineyard manager, around the middle of the day, I'd go out and I'd literally feel leaves. So plants have what are called stomata. So they, to a certain degree, like sweat like us, or just release moisture to keep their leaves cool. And the degree to which they do that and the leaf temperature can reflect their water requirement. And so, again, something that was mentioned by Joe is that co-development. So this is research from University of Adelaide over close to 10 years to look at converting this, what we as vineyard managers inherently knew you could do, that the canopy temperature would change depending on whether the vines were stressed or not. If they're happy, the leaves are actually really nice and cool. And if they're stressed, they're really warm, and you can feel this. And so development of a reliable sensor to measure that. So the spin out from University of Adelaide from that research is a business called Athena, and it's their Transpire sensor. And further to that, I suppose traditionally we had soil moisture sensors in place, and so we could see what the soil moisture was, and you could actually see from that how much water was being used by plants. But it was never really a direct measure. It was an indirect measure of how plants were coping. And this way, in combination, we've got, we can see what water is available in the soil. I can then get this new feed, a direct measure of how the vines are performing. So I can go on the cloud platform, see this, I think, called the Vine Water Index, and relate that back to how well the vines use water on that given day, given whether it was hot, cold, or whatever, and then adjust my management accordingly. So I guess in future, that's an example of something which, again, the next steps on that is to build decision support tools. So you have machine learning and AI, which can make those decisions that I'm making at the moment, or at least inform them. And then, so machine learning and AI through that. Now, again, I'm not concerned that that's going to take my job. I think in some ways it actually changes the focus. So just as Emma was saying, we don't have to go out and sample as much. Actually, we'll get to do our job, our real job, which is to use all the knowledge we know about vines, everything we know about irrigation, everything we know about the weather, to make really good decisions. The feeds that we're getting from AI and that are potentially a black box unless we understand the principles behind what's driving how things are calculated. So it changes the focus to really using your knowledge and thinking differently, and thinking about what the data is telling you, what the sensor's telling you, and whether that reflects reality as well, like being really accountable, holding the data to account, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing, using a bit of critical thinking to decide if it's accurate, and then knowing what to do next. So having that practical knowledge to know how to use the data to inform your actions. That's awesome. Joe, I might pass to you now to hear a little bit about the innovations that you're developing or that you are using at the moment that improve productivity, profitability, or sustainability within your production.
Thanks, Jane. So working on quite a few things at the moment, but one of the really interesting things to me is a little bit about sustainability and a little bit about production. So I'm working on a project at the moment, and it's supported by AgriFutures, and we're looking at what kinds of technologies are the best to measure my water quality. Now, my vineyard is only 60 hectares. It's not very big. But I've got 7 different sources of water on it. And that's one of the reasons why I bought it, because it's got lots of water. But those water sources all come from different places. So the water quality is quite different right across my vineyard. And I use the water for different things. So I use some of the water to irrigate my vines. And then I also use some of the water to help me put on sprays, chemicals to protect my vines. So it's really important to know about the quality of the water because particularly with irrigation, for example, I don't want to be pumping out kind of ocean salty water onto my grapevines. I don't particularly love it. But that water quality changes over time. So I have a big water system that runs through the middle of my vineyard. And depending on how much rain I've got, depends on how salty that water is. So sometimes I use up my big irrigation dam if it's been really, really long, hot, dry sort of season. I actually try not to irrigate that much, but occasionally you need to. And sometimes I have to move water around. So having a better understanding of what the water quality is at the time will mean that I can choose whether to pump that water now into a different place or save it for later. So what I'm looking at is how do I do that? To be honest, my vineyard manager at the moment, he drinks it. So it's actually fine. We can kind of tell how salty water is by drinking it. I'm sure you've all, drunk water accidentally in the ocean. You're quite sensitive to salt, but I'm not always there. I'm not always at the vineyard, and I would like to have a better idea of what's going on when I'm not there, and to have a bit more of an indicator of the change without having to go and drink it every day, because that's just pretty much a hassle. So what I would like to have is some kind of water sensor, so a quality sensor. So I'd be looking at something like electrical conductivity, for example, to give me an indication of salinity. So the project at the moment is looking at what are the user needs. So what do I want? Do I want to be able to just see the data on my phone or my computer? Or do I mind, wandering down to the dam every week and downloading the data? It sounds quite simple to measure water quality. We use EC meters in wineries all the time, but to keep it in a dam water isn't quite so easy because, things like algae grow on the outside of the sensor. So there's lots of kind of little tiny problems that we're trying to solve at the moment, but working on what that might kind of look like. And the same with what Hans said, looking to other industries to say, what do you guys do? So, in the medical industry, hospitals have a really keen eye on water quality. So they're one of the, industries that we're looking at to sort of say, where are you guys at and what can we do and how good is the technology, but also how much does it cost? I'm a small producer, so I'm not going to spend $20,000 on a big piece of technology just because it's cool. I want something that I can implement and afford. So that's probably the most exciting project at the moment. Yeah, thanks.
That's so interesting. Thank you so much. That's really, really cool. We've got a couple of questions in the chat, which is awesome because I was actually just going to ask if we could get some student questions. So we've got a few questions here. I might just read them out, and if they jump out at anyone in particular, you're more than welcome to stick your hand up and we'll pass over to you. So the first one is, how has climate change impacted the farming practices in regard to winemaking? Great question.
Do you want me to? I can take that one.
Go for it.
Yeah, look, it changes, makes us think about our canopy management. It can mean differences in that vine water requirement as well. Understanding the soils and their water holding capacity when we need to irrigate or not. And similarly, when fruit ripens as well. So in a broad sense that there's the saying of like a canary in a coal mine, like vines are very much the canary in the coal mine in terms of climate change. And we're really seeing a shift in terms of when bud burst occurs, so when they start growing and at the start of the season, and similarly then when they ripen, and also hotter temperatures, what we see in the fruit. So there's this talk of sugar ripeness. So the berries are sweet, of course, so they accumulate that sugar, but are they also what's called phenologically ripe? So are they ripe in terms of the flavors, characters of the seeds within the berries, ripe, ready as well? So there's this, it's creating we're seeing some of these things change, and so that's something as a vineyard manager, to a certain degree, we can change our practices. We can prune later to have bud burst later. So the later you prune vines, the later they start growing. And again, just really looking at things such as like when we use water and how we then use that water as well. So being really accountable in our water use is sort of a real focus for me, and understanding also what happens if, like how the vines are responding to, say, extreme heat or extreme cold events or wind. So if it's windy around flowering, your crop will be reduced. Similarly, if you get really hot conditions after, say, mid-season, it can result in berry shrivel, and that again means higher alcohol wines. And I think I see something in the comment there that about low or no alcohol wines. You know, that's definitely something the industry needs to focus on, is what people want and what they want to drink. And similarly, that if you get high alcohol wines, that may not be ideal in the winery either, or like fruit with high sugar levels, that creates problems within the winery as well.
That's awesome. On to the next question then, on that note. So non-alcoholic wines increasing in popularity, is it grown in the same way? Anyone want to field that one?
I can do it quickly. Quick, probably not that much justice, but yes and no. It's never an easy answer. So what Hans was saying in terms of the riper the fruit, the higher the alcohol. So if you are purposely making a wine that you want to make low alcohol, you might not let the fruit get as ripe. But there's lots of different ways that you can make a lower alcohol wine. You can just not let the fruit get as much sugar that converts into alcohol. But you can also use a reverse osmosis technique to actually extract the alcohol out of the wine. Non-alcoholic wine and low alcoholic wine are really growing in popularity. They're like the fastest growth markets in Australia. And so they're definitely something that we are paying attention to. And how, you know, I think human health is one of the really important things that consumers are asking for. So we need to be, you know, responsive to that market and say, this is what we are doing for looking after your health.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. I didn't know that. So that's very, very interesting. We've got a great one about careers here. It says, would getting an apprenticeship as a winemaker be a quicker way to get qualified rather than going to university, or do they learn different things? That's a fantastic question.
I think I could take this one, since I've sort of just come out of it. I think for both wine making and vineyards, I think you don't necessarily need, I guess, any sort of qualifications to get in the first place. I think where you sort of go, they'll teach you what they want and how they do their sort of winemaking or vineyard operations. I think you can do anything from, I guess, an apprenticeship or a diploma, certificates, all the way up to bachelor's and PhDs. So any sort of education you want to do, whether you want to do it at all, would be great, I think. I think you can also do things together. So, I mean, I did my course full time and just focused on the university. But if you definitely know you want to work in a vineyard, then you could do your vineyard or your university course alongside and just do it part-time or anything like that. There's so many different options, I guess, to getting into the wine industry or even just agriculture in general, that you can't really go wrong, I guess.
Yeah, awesome. That's great. Yep, that's fantastic. Thank you. Hans, over to you.
Yeah, I just might add just a little thing to that. That's the way that I got both into roles in geology as well as in viticulture. So in my first role in geology was as a pit technician, and in viticulture I was a vineyard operator. But with both of those, I was studying at the same time. I knew that I wanted to work in the sector, and so applied to do university part-time. So that's, again, another thing that I think is a good way to go is looking for a graduate program or at least having a mentor as well. So whilst you're studying, if you can find a mentor who's working in the sector and to bounce ideas, get perspective, that's the real value I found is working and studying at the same time, is that I had immediate perspective on what I was learning.
That's awesome. And it's so true. Work experience in the field is so helpful. So being able to do it side by side alongside your study helps to apply what you're learning, and then you get a more concrete understanding of it. That's awesome. We've got a few more fantastic questions here. So the next one is there a best winemaking region? The Limestone Coast wine seems to be the best.
Definitely not. Definitely the Great Southern, obviously. I think it depends on what wine style you like, predominantly. So you've got to choose what you like for you. And so wines get judged very interestingly and quite diversely. And so there are ways to, enter into a competition as a winery. And Pusey, I think, just won Best Winemaker according to James Halliday. So well done. But I think it just depends on what you like. It's like anything, consumer choice really rules. And so you've got to find what works for you. So, and it might not necessarily be fully about taste. It might be about transport miles, or it might be about, ESG accounting and your values and ethics, those sorts of things. So lots of different things go into making that decision.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. That's awesome. Another one. How has technology hindered the industry?
I might take that one, just saying that there's probably been, technology and research has really assisted the Australian wine sector. And I'm sure there are examples of where, there've been the industry's erred in pursuing a particular technology or something, but I think that naturally sorts itself out fairly quickly. I think that the key focus there needs to be that Australia is seen as the leader in the world, in the world, based on the research that's been done, the technology that's developed, I guess how we question what we do, and are continually improving, continually learning. So a few of those questions around adapting to climate change, so that perishable, that's involved a lot of research into what causes that. And as a vineyard manager, I now know at a high level what I need to reduce that issue, and it's irrigation or how I manage my canopy. And so this research feeds down to a level that we can make these really practical decisions.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for that, Hans. That's awesome. All right. Well, here's another good one. Should vineyards diversify, or should they only grow grapes?
I can talk a little bit about my vineyard. So we have sheep in the vineyard, and lots of vineyards actually have sheep. So we have they're not my sheep, I have to admit. They're my neighbour's sheep, and they come in and mow the lawn, basically. So they come in and control my cover crops, which is fantastic because then I don't do it. And they leave behind all sorts of wonderful manures and things, which, just helps the whole system work through. So that's fantastic. But yeah, I kind of think that there's a lot of opportunity with vineyards because they're quite small. If you've got extra land, you can start to think about other things. So it depends whether you're interested in diversifying your portfolio of knowledge, which can be quite hard because wine businesses are really complex businesses because you're thinking about, right from growing grapes to selling wine and exporting markets and those sorts of things. So it's complicated, but we might think about into the future going into a carbon credit farming or something like that. So we've got a bit of spare room. We might want to plant trees. We don't have to do too much to manage them, but we can contribute to climate change by drawing down CO2, and also, hopefully make some money on the side of that. So I think there's lots of options. It just depends. I know lots of, vineyards and wine businesses that do all sorts of different things. They might do avocados or beef, but it just depends on what you're interested in.
Yeah.
And Jane, can
Yeah.
I add something there as well? That like you look back historically as to where grapes were grown, and this is in Europe, for example, and they say, look, grapevines thrive on the hills or the slopes of the Rhine River Valley. So traditionally, I guess vines were grown in areas which couldn't be used for food production. So wheat and crops like that for making bread, they're all grown on the plains, and then on those marginal areas on the slopes, that's where the vines went. And that ties in as well as, is there a best wine growing region? So different varieties grow better in different areas, and it's all got to do with the climate. So in Tasmania, Pinot and Chardonnay, and Tasmania or the Yarra, those varieties may perform better because the temperatures are cooler. In Coonawarra, it may be Cabernet. Barossa is known for Shiraz. Over in New Zealand, Marlborough is known for Sauvignon Blanc. And if you grow those varieties in each of those regions, you'll get different characters. And it can just come down to, can you actually get that variety ripe in a particular location? So trying to grow Cabernet in parts of Tasmania could be quite challenging. You may actually, the length of season and the warmth of the summer may not actually be adequate to get it ripe. So that's a bit of a distinction around the regions. So it comes back, as Joe says, to that personal preference of what you like drinking, and that might direct where you're growing which variety.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks heaps for that, Hans. That's awesome. I am having a look at the time, and I know that we've got a couple of additional questions which I would love to get to shortly, but I might just pass over to Joe Hargraves from Wine Australia now to give us a bit of a rundown about an upcoming resource that can be a really helpful tool for students and also for teachers to find out a little bit more about careers in the wine industry. Over to you, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. And just bear with me while I share my screen while I'm doing that. So yeah, hi everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. What I'm just going to do is give you a little bit of a sneak peek. We've got some exciting new resources coming up that Wine Australia has been developing with the sector. We will have a new Careers in Viticulture and Wine website that will be launched by the end of the year. And as part of that website, we're developing a virtual tour, which has also associated with that this overarching career matrix. So students will be able to come in and explore different roles in the sector based on your strengths and interests and what values and aspirations you have around your future careers, and also subjects that you enjoy or what you're good at school. So you'll be able to explore this resource. And we'll also have a number of videos and information about career pathways into the sector, and also a number of, for the teachers, some curriculum aligned activities. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea, a sneak peek of what we've got coming up. We're pretty excited to have that available.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that, Joe. I am looking at the time, and I think we are just about out of time. However, if the questions that you popped in the chat today haven't been answered, I might touch base with our three panelists and see if we can get some written responses, and I can send those through to each of the schools in an email. I'd like to say a massive thank you to our three panelists. This has been such an informative session and really exciting to learn about the innovations that the wine industry is adopting. So a huge thank you to our three panelists for joining us today. A massive thank you to Wine Australia for helping to facilitate this session. And a huge thank you also to all of the schools who were able to join us today. You asked some phenomenal questions, and I really hope that you got a lot out of this session, because I know that I certainly did. If you'd like to find out more about careers in the wine industry, jump onto the Career Harvest website, or as Joe said, the new resource from Wine Australia will be available by the end of the year to learn a little bit more about how you can get involved. For more Science Week resources, can you tell it's the end of the day? For more Science Week resources, jump onto the Prime Zone website. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and have a lovely Science Week.